Today is October 11th, 2016, and we're recording Sweet Memories Encore about Dave Finkelman Auditorium. Do we have your permission to record?
Yes.
Yes.
Let's start.
You want me to start?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Finkelman Auditorium. I first became acquainted with Finkelman Auditorium when I was a freshman in college. I worked actually as a student up here as a worker, got paid through a work study program. And I was telling you a story earlier, and I will tell it now. The large metal piece that used to be in the fountain out here wasn't here when the fountain was put up. It was a very simple little fountain which had lights that came up through it, and it was just gorgeous in its simplicity. And we used to call it the Finkel Tinkle. And that was a very common name for it in the whole period that I worked for the school and in the time that I was doing stuff with campus community players here, clear up into the late 1970s. But the staff of the university always used to say, "Don't say that when Gladys is around. She will get all upset." I'm absolutely sure Gladys Finkelman would not have cared and would have been delighted that we had a name for the fountain. But that was one of the first memories of here is working in the building with the Finkel Tinkle.
Well, I guess since I was the first technical director, I was summoned to the campus because I was the high school speech theater teacher across the street at Middletown High School. And I was told that I was to be the technical director. It was not a job interview. And I found out that Gladys Finkelman said to bring me over here because she was watching the productions at Middletown High School, even though they had no children at the school. She came to all of these, which I didn't know. So that's kind of how I got the job, I guess. And then a lot of interesting stories. Probably, and I might be partially to blame for this, we had the Lecture Artist Series, and Claire was concerned she couldn't get enough students to attend. And I said, we need some rock and roll bands or pop or music. So she decided each year there would be a band coming. I will not name the particular one that came because they went to great fame, but they would have a list of technical demands and personal demands. For example, there'd be a light plot, you have to set everything up, certain things in the sound system. And sometimes they would require that there had to be refreshments and food backstage in the green room. Well, this particular band did not get the particular kinds of food that they wanted, and one of the beverages was alcoholic, and that was a no-no to have alcohol. So we didn't. They were not happy, they performed. But after they left, my job was to shut off all the lights and make sure the doors were locked, and I go to the green room. And there was a message, which I can't totally repeat all of the words in it, but the message was written with ketchup and mustard squirt bottles saying that our food sucked, but it was a bit more vivid language than that. And there was something else they were upset about and did not like the fact that dill pickles were left on the table because those had not been ordered. And they had a comment about that, which, so that's one of my standout memories. And by the way, the band is still playing, I believe. Right?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
Well, the same members?
Many of the same members, not all.
Many of the same members.
Yeah.
Yeah. How hard. I'm Mike McVeigh. I'm the current technical director, and I think I've probably got a longevity award coming because I came in around 1989 and I've lasted 26, 27 years as technical director. By the time I got here, the Finkeltinkle out front had become Snakes in Ecstasy. And that's what I've always known it as. We've had a death in the auditorium at one point.
The ghost?
We are listed on the Ohio Registry of Haunted Places. But that was a bit of a misunderstanding. It had something to do with the fact that I smoke a pipe when this is a smoke-free campus, and I have not smoked the pipe since we became smoke-free. But you could often catch pipe tobacco smell throughout the building, and somebody wrote us in for a ghost in the building. One of my favorite stories that I'd forgotten and started to tell was a Russian dance troupe that was coming in mid-February from Chicago. And Rod Nimps had contracted with these people. They were supposed to be here at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and there was, of course, just as things usually are, a large snowstorm. And at 8 o'clock, which was curtain time, they still had not arrived. But because of cell phones, we'd stayed in touch, and they were in Richmond, Indiana. And Rod said, well, you better go out and tell the crowd something. And I walked out on stage and said, well, the Russians are coming. But right now they're in Richmond, Indiana, and it's 45 minutes until they get here. And in 45 minutes they got here, they hand-loaded all of their instruments on stage. They danced like mad Russians for 2.5 hours, and because it was a Sunday night, they were unable to get any regular vodka in town. So Rod did what he thought was the next best thing, and he bought the reduced alcohol vodka from Myers or Kroger, and if they had not been insulted before when we gave them this vodka, they were certainly insulted afterwards, and they did not write on the walls with anything, but they made it well known that this was not good vodka. Not at all. Up to you, Jeff.
Hello. I'm not sure that my stories hold a candle to these stories. My time here has been shorter than the others. I was at Middletown campus from 2006 to 2008 before I moved to Oxford. I guess when I got here, I was really interested in whether or not there was theater going on here. Because I'd done theater in high school, I'd started doing theater in the community, and I wanted to perform here. And the first time I walked into this auditorium, as most people do, they say, "Oh wow, I want to do something on that stage. It's grand. It seats 1.5 million people, and and it would be really cool to do something here." So I was taking Mike's class at the time, and I remember having a conversation with him, and I said, "Mike, is there a way we could do a play on this stage?" And he's like, I don't know. You need to talk to Dave Ballard. And I said, okay. And I have wonderful memories of Dave Ballard, including when he kicked a desk in the back of speech class because somebody had not left the seat open for him, and that's where he always sat. Anyway, love Dave Ballard. But anyway, I went to Dave Ballard one time and I said, hey, Mike says that I need to come and talk to you about doing theater here, and has something been done in the past? And he kind of gave me this wizened old looked down his glasses at me, and he says, well, have a seat. and he started to go through the history of Bunny Hollow Players and how that had been formed, and he was the advisor for Bunny Hollow Players, and how they used to organize dinner theaters at Verity Lodge, and once in a while they would have them here. And I said, well, do you still have information? And he said, give me just a second. And he went to this giant ancient, filing cabinet. He pulled out a folder that was about this thick and, threw it down in front of me and said, there's everything I have. You can go through it. And so we pieced through all of this material, years and years of old programs and scripts and things that they had done through Bunny Hollow Players. Most of them, spaghetti dinners and one-act plays. And I took this tome of paperwork to Mike, and I said, can we still do something like this? And he said, sure, you figure it out, and we'll make it work. So we revamped Bunny Hollow Players. I'm assuming is it still going? Is it still going today? Great.
Yeah.
Excellent, yeah. So I revamped it that year. It was either 2006 or 2007.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we brought it back. We had something like 12 members, and we had a reading of Harvey, because we were going to do Harvey. I don't know where that came from, but we sat down, and I think we had 4 people show up for this reading, and Mike was like, it's not going to work, we need to find something else. So we found a one-act play called Check Please, which is a really, really cutesy one-act play that takes place in a restaurant where this man and woman are having dinner with various blind dates, and then in the end they find each other. So we
The most frequently performed
Yes.
one-act play in the United States.
Yes.
In fact.
So we scrambled, put this together. We set up tables on the stage. We had food catered in, and we had a wonderful time. It was a great experience. So other than that, I had experience working, events in here from time to time, which was really, really neat. Saw some interesting stuff. Cleaned up glitter after the bodybuilders. I remember doing that. And that was
yes.
Fun.
That and body butter.
Yeah,
So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned David, and when I started, Dave Ballard, and when I started classes here in 1970, the theater opened in 1969. If I remember, the first show ever performed was in September of '69. It was a show, maybe it was called Requiem or something like that. It was written by Malcolm Saddam, who was a English professor here. But immediately thereafter, the next year, was the advent of Campus Community Players. And Campus Community Players was this interesting mixture of Arts in Middletown organization, the campus, and a community segment. And Jenny was very involved with us, and John was very involved with us. And I was very, very involved, not only when I was in school, but for the years after. And I remember the first thing that we did when I was a student here. Phil Hines, who was also a faculty member here, an English professor, wrote a play called
Up Against the Wall.
Up Against the Wall, Grandma. Up Against the Wall, Grandma. And I began my life in beyond high school theater, playing a 70-year-old man, and I've been doing that ever since. Now that I'm almost 70, I find it interesting. But David was so distressed at times that this wasn't a full performing theater, that there weren't plays in here all the time. It is such an amazing facility. Now, when I first started working here, Mike and I were talking earlier, when I first started working here, I literally could have worked here every night of my life the first 3 years I was in college. We had that much stuff going on. We had Campus Community was doing 4 shows a year. They were doing them all here. They were rehearsing here. Yeah. We had the Artisan Lecture Series was always here. The film series, the travelogues were always here. And of course, we had groups come in regularly. We had the Shakespeare Company come in from Washington, D.C., the National Shakespeare Repertory Company, and we would come in and help them set up structures. And the interesting thing about my exposure to this theater is I did an enormous amount of technical work here. I did an enormous amount of performing here, acting and even directing here. As recently as last year, I was involved with a couple things with the symphony here. It's a great place.
Jenny's right. We've been the home of the Middletown Symphony Orchestra since its inception as
Right.
well. Yeah.
Well, since the campus was here, yeah.
Yeah.
And what people probably didn't realize, but because of doing the technical work, the sound, the acoustics in here are incredible. When an actor was on stage and could whisper, you could sit in the very last row and you would hear it. But the acoustics were incredible. The other thing that was unique because of the seating pattern and how it raised, whenever we had dance. Now, ballet was extremely difficult for the lighting. We worked this young man to death on the ladder, literal hours setting lighting. But what I learned was we enhanced the dancers so much with the lighting that if you went to another auditorium which had a third the incline of this one, you wouldn't see it. People got a different perspective of the ballet dancers and the lighting on the rise of the seats. Incredible.
Because when the theater was first built, the light board was backstage.
Right.
And it was a monstrosity. I mean, it was a light board with 32 hand-pulled dimmers. And I mean,
4 students to operate.
if you had a complex thing, you had to have 4 people operating with a stupid light board.
Broom handles.
Yeah.
It literally looked like something out of Frankenstein, the Bride of Frankenstein.
Well, if you had 2 dimmers on that were more than 4 feet apart on that huge board, you were in trouble.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But we found that particularly with musical groups, symphonies, rock bands, any kind of group that was doing music and they were playing instruments, you had to be very careful how you lit them from out front because you would blind them.
Yeah.
So the first row actually backstage was a row of Fresnels and ellipsoidal lights that were very good for lighting musical productions like that. And so the way we used to do this, because this guy was my boss for 3 years, and the way we used to do this, because this way, as he explained to me, you don't have to climb up and down the ladder as much. The ladder was on crossbars with wheels. Now, it was a great big double ladder that went up like this, and it had a single ladder in the middle that pushed up and locked.
Yeah.
So what would happen?
It's still downstairs.
And it is still downstairs. I saw it the other day when it was in the building. What would happen is I would go up the ladder, and John got to do this a few times too.
More than a few.
We got to go up the ladder, and you would climb over the single ladder that went up the middle, and you would lock your legs on the ladder. And Ron would roll me from light to light to focus the next light all the way across the stage. And this was really cool until the day he ran me into the wall. Then we had to have a discussion about doing this anymore. I
ran you into the ropes.
You did that once too, but the amazing thing about it was Ron and I came through, we just walked through the theater the other day. And I've been here a few times in the last 5 or 6 years. Ron has not been in here for 25 years. And we walked around and you could just feel memory after memory, story after story, just jumping out at you from all the times we spent here. And the amazing thing were, they were all great. I mean, I remember complaining constantly when I was in college that I lived in this place. But all the stories are great, and it was so neat. And I got to meet so many cool people.
Now,
including a lot of folks here.
You two remember the steps, how they are in the hallway. Because sometimes they could not cross backstage because we were using the far scrim. They would have to get to from stage right to stage left. And the idea was you would leap, 3 or 4 steps at a time to get over to the other side. And they'd brag about they could do a whole series. Who could take the largest leap to get up and the fewest leaps to get to the other side of the stage? And nobody ever broke a leg.
It's amazing.
I tried.
There's a hand
Yeah,
in the back.
you did dive into the theater. You did dive into it.
Just to clarify, the theater opened when, in 69?
Right?
Okay, the first production was in 1970, January of 1970.
Okay.
Malcolm Saddam's The 20th Mission. I was in it. Yay! Directed by Dave Ballard. And I think I'm the first person to sing in a production. And you're right, it was using the acoustics. I sang from the corner of the stage. I sang from back in the light booth.
Yeah.
And because the projection in this theater was just phenomenal. But it was a wonderful, wonderful experience.
And Jenny, tell us about very nearly breaking your leg. I remember this really well.
Well, it was during your good man Charlie Brown with Campus Community Players in January of '76, I think. And
Sounds
the design, who designed that set? Did you, John?
I don't believe I did.
Well,
no,
the stage was designed as a platform that was built in front of the stage that we see. So it was built out
Thrust,
over
yeah.
what would be considered an orchestra pit.
Extended apron.
Yeah, oh, thank you. There's a technical term that I didn't know.
Well, we had the pieces for it because I had to build it years ago, and they were stored down in the basement, and they reused it several times.
And building that involved taking out maybe half a dozen seats on either side of the
Yeah.
front row.
Yep.
I thought the campus administration was going to be apoplectic about that.
We never
The only
told them.
time.
Yeah, right, no, it wasn't the only time.
Wasn't
That was
the only
I remember. Anyway, so that meant that the front edge of this platform, what did you call it? Extended platform,
Extended apron.
was over the first row of seats. And I was playing Lucy, and it was in dress rehearsal, we did the opening number, and it ends up with Lucy downstage right, and she turns around and says, "If only you weren't so wishy-washy," and then she crosses the whole stage and exits stage left. Except I lost my footing because when I was on stage, I didn't wear my glasses. I lost my footing and went off the front edge of the stage into the second row of seats.
Ooh.
And I hit my hip on one of the wooden armrests. I remember being able to hear our director, who was way up here in the dark, saying, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." And all I could think of was get up in the light so he can see you're not dead. And I wasn't. I just had a very badly sprained ankle that still swells. and a fantastic bruise on my hip.
See, those are the lasting memories from theater. The permanent
They
injuries.
break a leg.
That don't go away, yeah.
Yeah.
I've worked in probably, I would say, 30 other theaters. And without a doubt, this theater has the best acoustics of any theater I've ever worked in. The curtained brick walls, the very fact that the auditorium tapers like a reverse funnel makes sure that even somebody sitting in the back row is only sitting 80 feet from the performers on stage. Roscoe Lee Brown was here doing a poetry reading, and when I originally got here, there was no forestage or no apron there, and I got the story on why there was no apron or no elevated pit, and I realized very soon that the sweet spot for the auditorium is at about 3 feet high and just about 6 feet from the front row of audience. And because of their contract or their tech writer, they had insisted on microphones and a sound system that at that time we didn't have. And so we had hired a sound system, and there were speakers all over the stage and microphones and cables. And Roscoe Lee Brown, who's from Jamaica, walked in, and with that, he was the narrator in Babe, the pig. Yeah, and he was one of the grandfathers on the Cosby Show. But he walked in and he said, "What is all of this?" And I said, "Well, it's the sound system that you insisted on us having." And he walked to the center of the apron that I'd built, and he went, "Take all of that away, we don't need it." And we did. He and the guy that he was working with spoke, and audience members got up to walk outside into the aisle to cough. It was electric.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I remember about the acoustics was that you had to be really careful wherever you were. If you were backstage, you had to be very soft walking, because just the clicking of your heels on the floor would go through the theater like crazy. The other thing I remember is, because everything was backstage except the sound rack originally here, when you went up into the booth up here, you couldn't say a word, because if you said anything, it jumped out of there and just ran through the theater. It was amazing. You could hear everything in there.
You know, in the lecture artist series, we had several opera singers, and I can't remember their names, but I was amazed because after one of them had performed here, she was backstage and she said, "You know, your acoustics match Lincoln Center." And I couldn't believe it. I mean, she'd performed at Lincoln Center, and she said that. And when she sang that night, she used no mic and didn't need it, you know. And because I was impressed with it, because I remember when I saw, I forget the opera now, at the Lincoln Center, the deathbed scene at the end, and the leading lady is dying. It was
Othello.
no. It was to do with the Greek tragedy.
Oh,
And but at any rate, she's singing, "I'm 8 rows up," and I almost can feel her breath, it seems like, as she's singing her death song there, and she's lying down. You know, the acoustics were that good. And I went to Lincoln Center several times once I got here, because that helped me to understand more, and it was a good excuse to get to go to New York. But I was really amazed, and I don't know if the sound, when this was designed, I would love to know what the architects had in mind, because they had to be extremely creative. The way the seats are angled on the edges and what you see, any kind of performance, whether it's dance, it's a drama, a comedy, it doesn't matter, a stage set. The sights as well as the sounds and the perspective, the angles, it would captivate people. And ironically, even when little kids would be here, they would be engrossed. They weren't running, you know, and making a lot of noise and wanting to leave and et cetera. So there was something about it, and it obviously had a lot to do with our symphony being here.
I don't remember ever microphoning a show in here.
We didn't really.
No, we didn't have to.
Didn't have to.
You know, we were talking earlier about accidents occurring in here, and I'm sitting here and I'm looking at the front of the lobby, and the metal bars that are across the doors and the windows there were not originally there. Those windows were it was very open. And one night we were doing a show here, Campus Community was doing a show, and a gentleman came up and he walked up and he turned right in to one of the windows, because he didn't realize it was a window. He thought it was, and he basically walked through the window. And it, of course, was years ago when the windows weren't quite as sturdy as they are now, and it broke. And at that point they said, "We got to do something about this because somebody's going to get hurt." So that I was just reminded of that by looking at those bars.
Well, as long as we're talking about accidents, we have to talk about Auntie Mame.
Auntie Mame wasn't an accident, it was a disaster.
Well, there was a particular accident during Auntie Mame, during the scene where Mame entertains her nephew's fiance's parents, and she's very avant-garde, of course, and she's going to serve flaming cocktails. And was it a performance or a dress rehearsal? I can't remember.
It was a performance.
The flaming drinks got a little out of hand, and they went up in flames. The couch started to go up in flames. And Les, were you on stage for that?
Yes,
Was it,
I almost went up in flames.
well, it was Les then who just handled it with such aplomb that the actress playing the maid walked behind Les with a tray, and Les has this flaming drink, and he just very nonchalantly turns around and says, "Nora, could you take this, please?"
Mine was.
We
Mr.
made those
Babcock,
drinks.
you've gone
We were
out.
trying to figure out how to do those drinks because those drinks are a very difficult piece of that show. And so what we decided was we put Joy liquid in a glass. We put metal stir sticks in the glass, and we put a very thin layer of rubbing alcohol on top, and we lit the rubbing alcohol. And so my drink had to go out because Mame says to Mr. Babcock, "Mr. Babcock, you've gone out." Well, what happened was the very first night of performance, the night of dress rehearsal, the drinks hadn't burnt so well. So the prop lady kept adding a little more alcohol each time. Well, the problem we got into was that the drinks were extremely full. The other thing that happened, some people got plastic stir sticks, which with a flaming drink isn't much help. Fortunately, I had a metal stir stick. I'm sitting on a $4,000 couch that we have borrowed from a local furniture company. And it's signed out in my name. And I'm trying to stir this drink down so it'll go out. The drink spills on my hand. My hand is now on fire. I sit the drink on the ground. I pat my hand out just in time for Auntie Mame to look at me and say, "Mr. Babcock, you've gone out." The audience thought that was wonderful. The better part, however, is that someone from the back of the audience screamed, "Finally!" It was a scary moment. It was a scary moment. I really saw my entire life. I mean, this was 1975, 76. I was 3 years out of college. I saw my entire ability to ever make money go away because I was going to burn these people's furniture up.
Well,
Yes, that was a great moment.
Yes, it was.
we never could keep enough Band-Aids downstairs in the first aid kit. Somebody was always beating a finger with a hammer, hammering nails and missing the nail and hitting a finger. There was all those little accidents that would go on all the time.
Well, the amazing thing about it, and I don't know if you guys have had this experience. The amazing experience I had was that back then, you're 23 years old, 24 years old, and you don't think you can ever get hurt. And we did some of the dumbest things that you could ever think of. I remember going up into the loft over on the side, the
loading rail.
Yeah, the loading rail. And I remember having John hold me by the seat of the pants so I could lean out over that rail and put weights so we could counterweight something instead of bringing it down and having to fight the weight. And I'm just hanging there, and my whole life is dependent on the strength of John's right hand because he's got a hold of my pants and the strength of the material in my pants. We were crazy. That set for La Mancha was insanity.
Definitely.
Let me tell you about La Mancha from an audience perspective. That show was done without an intermission. Les, you were in it, correct?
I was.
And Ginny, were you also?
No, I was in the audience.
Larry Moore directed that, and David Schultz as Don Quixote. I have never seen a community theater, I've never had a community theater production affect me the way that one did. I mean, I was just emotionally drained when we left the theater, and it was one of the finest productions I have ever seen.
David Schultz was incredible.
Yes, it was just incredible.
And the set design was incredible. It filled the pit with people crawling through and around with lights glowing from windows and hatches, and I'm sure Les is going to discuss the height of the drawbridge that came down on stage to drop into the prison floor, I guess. And,
Ron designed the set, and the only people that had to use this were Sancho and Don Quixote, and I was Sancho. One of the moments I wasn't playing a 70-year-old man. But I was Sancho, and we started up because the show starts with them coming into the prison. And we started up, and we were literally up, our heads were in the battens of the theater. You know, we were 15, 18, 20 feet in the air, walking down this.
To get the lighting effect and realizing half of your audience was so high up, we had to deal with that.
Yeah,
even in the New York production, the seating wasn't that high up, you know. That was a real challenge, lighting that staircase.
And backstage was even more frightening. In that we had every ladder, platform, riser stacked on top of each other to get up to that height to start down the staircase and drawbridge. And then also the orchestra, I believe, was on stage, upstage left, upstage right.
Yeah, they were actually under the set.
Under the set. And there was a trap door that raised up for part of the prison that was amazing to let characters down, to crawl down through the pit area. It was just a fantastic set. And I think it was all covered in burlap, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
To give it a nice texture effect.
Where did we get that? There's a story about the burlap.
I think that was from a friend of ours, got it from Armco.
From Armco. Armco.
Something tells me we didn't pay for it. But
we didn't. Armco was throwing it away. And so they said, yeah, you want to take it, take it. And he'd load up his car every night with burlap and take it home and bring it to the theater.
Some kind of sacks that held pellets of iron ore or something in them.
We were very good back in the day at building sets out of things that you weren't supposed to build sets out of. You know, most people use flats, not us. We built stuff out of cardboard because you could get cardboard free. And cardboard and masking tape, we were wizards. We used to do stuff with cardboard and masking tape. Shouldn't be allowed to do.
And our favorite line was, "Don't worry, it's Finkelman," because the audience was far enough away that they couldn't tell that it was cardboard.
Well, whenever we did have muslin to make a frame and paint it, that came free from Tom Shantz. He'd give us the leftover muslin from the costume shop, and I'd take every piece of it I could get. Because you could do things paint-wise the way you could blend. You couldn't do it with cardboard, no matter how much you tried, but you could do anything with muslin.
We did
You can do anything with cardboard.
Yeah, well.
Although Finkelman, the auditorium itself, is very, very close, John's exactly right. The audience is really removed. Before the renovation, we were at 748,
I think,
748 seats. We may have lost one or two. But when Jeff got excited about starting Bunny Hollow or rejuvenating Bunny Hollow, I kind of realized that an audience of 30 or 40 people would look like BBs in a boxcar in the theater. And I kind of went, well, what do you do about that? All our lights are on stage. In fact, at that time, our lighting control was on stage as well. So what we did was we dropped in the main act curtain. We built the stage to face the opposite direction, upstage against the wall. We put in, did we have 200 seats?
I don't know if we had that. We had tables too.
Well, that's right, we had tables.
Because we served food.
So we had at least 100 seats and tables, and it gave the auditorium a really intimate performing space, like a black box. It was really great.
We did that many times too as fundraisers. We'd have what we call songs and suites as part of Middletown Lyric Theater, post-campus community players.
Yeah.
And we did 2 or 3 productions out here on stage. Audience on stage, served food, served snacks, served drinks, and it went over very well as a small black box type of theater.
Audiences loved seeing all the battens, all the ropes backstage, all the lights, yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that happened when Campus Community Players disbanded, and eventually the subsequent community theater in town was the Middletown Lyric Theater. And Middletown Lyric Theater has performed probably 10 shows in this theater. But one of the things is we were doing most of our performing down at the Arts in Middletown building. Very small space. Your audience is right on top of things. And of course, that means everything that you build has to have a reality to it that it doesn't have to have when it's 50 feet away from people. And that was one of the things that prompted we don't have to worry how that looks. This is Finkelman. And it wasn't a knock. It was man, it's so much easier to do some stuff here. I'm kind of like David Ballard. I rue to this day the fact that this theater doesn't have live theater in it on a regular basis. It is a great, from a technical standpoint, from an acting standpoint, from an audience standpoint, it is an unbelievable venue. And having done all three things here, I've designed for this theater. I've watched shows in this theater, and I know I've acted in a lot of them, and it deserves, those two people on the wall over there deserve for this place to have live theater in it regularly. I don't know how we make that happen, but I'd love to see us start talking about a way to make that happen. There's got to be a way. It makes sense. It's such a great venue. It's such a great place to be.
Well, one of the things that I think was important back early on, a lot of the venues that would come in here, they would bus school kids in. It would be like an outing. And kids would come here to see things. And for some of these kids in grade school, that was their first play they ever saw, or their first musical, or their first dance of anything. And to me, that was extremely important. I say that because I think, going back to Middletown High School across the street, this was a small town, sort of hidden in the shadows of Cincinnati and Dayton on the other side, and they had all of their, ballet, performance, professional theater, opera, everything. And, we were sort of in the shadow, but we had such great opportunity, and getting started with kids, busing them in, was a big part of it. And that's what helped with the summer theater and really making Middletown, the people enjoyed it. They didn't come to something because, they had to donate money, or they had to come because their kid was in something. But there was a real love of theater, of opera, of the symphony, of ballet. In a steel town, ballet, thanks to Phyllis DeWeese. That was incredible.
As technical director for the last 25, 26, 27 years, we still do some of that. The Free Fantastic Friday program that happens at least once a month, sometimes twice a month, depending upon the schedule, winds up busing in anywhere between 300 to 600 elementary and high school students for Friday morning performances. And it is, the university is committed to that program. In fact, at one point, the university was even subsidizing bus costs when it got difficult for individual schools to do that. We still see now roughly 7 events per month. Now, when I say 7 events, anytime there's a symphony performance, there are at least 4 rehearsals and a performance. And I count each rehearsal as an event, because someone has to be here to staff it and make sure that the building is okay. But the Artist and Lecture Series is still here. We wind up doing lots of outreach. Some of the things that we don't talk about a lot are Bodybuilders are coming again this
Yes.
year.
Get your brooms out. Get your brooms out and wipe the oil off the floors.
floor, yeah.
The
Do
oil
we
off.
still have dance?
We still have between 10 and 12 dance recitals a season. Plus, we've picked up Arthur Murray, who are adult dancers from Cincinnati, Westchester, and Dayton, that all come together as a central location for, and in fact, the Arthur Murray people are like us so well, they've bought us a $15,000 electric LED curtain, and they've been very, very generous grantors of funds to keep us going here. The real problem logistically is, and it's a problem for the university, logistically, it's difficult to make this place break even. When Dave and Gladys, I knew it was a G. When Gladys donated the $1 million for the building, there was never established an operating fund. So we only make the money that we make from rentals. And that includes buying new light bulbs, buying new instruments, new sound equipment, all the things that are reusable. Currently, we are still the least expensive 660 seat auditorium in the tri-state area. And every time I say we should really raise the price just to keep us, trying to break even, and the university comes back every time and says, no, we want the building to be used by the community, so we try to keep our rates low. So it's impossible. What we could really use is an operating fund that we didn't have to generate all of the funds through rental. I'm sorry, that's the
Editorial comment.
the editorial comment for here. Yeah. Speaking of good stories and breaking legs,
Yes.
we did at least 2 years. I think we did a Miss Middletown beauty
Junior Miss.
pageant.
Yeah, Junior Miss pageant.
Here on stage. And
Yeah.
I won't give anyone's name in particular, but the host or the MC was a mayor of Middletown. And to open the entire event, we had put the podium, the formal podium, on stage. And before the show, I said to him, there's a little step stool on the back of the podium that will raise you 6 inches to make you look more. Do you want that step? And he said, yeah, because he was rather a short man. And so the last thing I did was put the step down. We opened with dramatic music, very little light on stage. We follow-spotted the mayor. He was wearing a tuxedo and a lovely boutonniere, and he strode right across the stage in this follow spot, forgot about the step, hit it, and went flat over on his face.
I feel his pain. I feel his pain.
And he just disappeared, There was nothing but the follow spot, and he was there, and then he was boom, gone. And he popped right back up and was like, Afterwards, we got the Band-Aids out of the box because he had ruined his shins. Oh.
Well, in Junior Miss, they were smart. They had been doing the Junior Miss pageants at Middletown High School. And guess what they discovered? When they came over here, when the girls would do their performance and their acts, it was so much easier, and they looked so much better because not only the sound, but the way the seats raised up at the angle and everything. They discovered quickly this was an ideal stage setup for beauty pageants.
Yeah.
You know, so.
What's nice, also nice about this facility is not only has the green room upstairs, but a classroom upstairs, at least it did
Yeah, it still
20 years
does.
ago.
Yeah. Is the
As well
classroom
as
used?
Two dressing rooms,
No.
a makeup bar.
Well, I mean, it's used as a room, but it isn't used
They
as a
don't have
classroom.
Classroom
any
anymore.
classes here.
Oh, yeah. We do acting for the non-major here, and I was telling Sam that Jeff, the man with two front names,
Yes.
that the class has gotten so popular and so large that it's got 30 students per semester. We now have to use the stage area so that everybody has room to warm up. We did a renovation 4 years ago, and the renovation was, you remember what the cost was on that? It was $3 or $4 million when it happened. We reworked all the lighting, we reworked all the sound, all the seating. They managed to number the seats backwards. One of the changes that they wound up making was the men's restroom, which used to be over here, has switched to this side. The women's restroom, which was on this side, has now gone over there. And for the first 2 years, there'd be an intermission, and you'd hear somebody shriek. And you'd have to go and go, no, men's over here.
First 4 times I came in the building after the renovation, I went in that restroom. And I walked in and I knew I was the wrong place. And then you come over here, well, the door used to be on
that side.
the inside wall, and there's no door. And I'm like, it's like, man, the men aren't allowed to go to the bathroom anymore. This is what you pay for coming to the theater. You can't go to the bathroom anymore if you're a man.
That's
Finally,
true.
I found it on the other
Found the
side.
one that,
Yeah, just in time.
it's a big improvement, yeah.
There's another time the stage was used for classes that it was not intended for. As part of the continuing education, we had a class in aerobic dance, which was exercise class. And they would like to have met in the gym, but the gym was tied up with some other phys ed class or basketball practice or whatever. So the aerobic dance class had to be moved to the stage of Dave Finkelman Auditorium. And it just so happened that it was being taught by someone who had been in community theater productions and had done a lot of choreography for us. So I took that class for several sessions, and it was really fun because I could kind of convince myself that it wasn't exercise. We were practicing these steps, and any minute now they were going to bring in the sets and the costumes. And
We're just
Exactly,
practicing. Yeah, we've talked a whole lot about what we love about this place. I'll tell you what I hate about this place. I'll tell you the thing I really hate. The baffles. The rolling baffles that we used to use for symphonies, and they're still in the building. I saw them the other day when I was walking around. They're these big, large white things that go up and bend over at the top,
Right.
and they're heavy, and somebody that works here now is sitting back there laughing because everybody who works here hates the baffles.
Oh, it was a murder.
Yeah.
Of course, it wasn't easy to move the baby grand piano from the basement up either.
Well, that's because there was only one way to fit it into that elevator.
Well, I won't say that it's any better or less, but I at least found out that they're still making casters for those sound shells, those baffles, and we got new casters, and I blew one whole semester's budget on new casters, and we put them all on, with the exception of 2 of the sound shells. And I don't care how you stack them, how you mark them, the 2 that are broken are always the 2 that are in the front. And you every time you, and then the next 9 of them just roll right out. They're oiled. They go right into place.
There were a lot of stories about that elevator using it, getting things up and down.
Well, the problem is you got a scene shop in the basement where you're building your stuff, and then you got an elevator that's only 6.5, 7 feet tall, 8 feet tall. Well, scenery for the stage is 12, 15 feet tall. It doesn't want to come up through that elevator. So what you would have to do, now you have to understand it's a big industrial elevator, but it's really only what, 6 by 8?
Oh, barely, yeah.
Yeah. So what you would do is you would run the elevator up, and it had big doors so that it had a floor when it was not open. And these big doors would come up, and what we would do is we would push the one open and let the chains hold it, and we'd push the other one against the wall and stick a screwdriver through a big bolt in the wall and hold that, because that sucker might fall back down. And then you'd bring stuff up with those doors open at an angle and this way and that way. That elevator was a joy to work
The
with.
road shows, that was the nightmare.
Yeah.
Because they brought things in on big semi-trucks. And so a lot of the scenery was way too large to fit in the elevator. And the games we'd have to play and what we'd have to do, it would take so many people, and we'd have to have people in the basement, but you still have to have people up on the main stage leaning over. I can't believe that we never had one of our student workers fall into the elevator shaft trying to help angle a piece of it, but it never happened. Under my watch, it didn't.
Yeah, no.
No, it
we
happened.
never-
We just told you they quit. I'll tell you, on a couple occasions, we actually backed trucks up to these front doors
Yeah.
and brought
Yeah.
scenery in,
Yeah.
particularly tall, thin stuff,
Through the
here
house.
and just walked it down the stairs.
Yeah, the Sorg Opera, who used to perform at the Sorg, and their other performance place was in Richmond. One year, they decided they were going to do Babes in Toyland, and they were gonna do it here. So their designers, who were from out of town, came over and they measured the elevator, and I went, make sure that you do the height, and what are they? And they had designed these 2 or 3 storied tall buildings in the town of toys, you know? The problem was they made them all 6 to 8 feet wide, and they were done out of a stucco material so that it was just, it looked puffy and had a density to it. I remember when they came in and they started loading up the elevator, they got all the stuff in except they got to the houses that were supposed to be 3 stories tall. And I said, well, you know, you can put the elevator, leave it down, prop the tops open, and slip it in. And they were too big to fit through that way. And I said, you know, it's not gonna fit. And the designer literally wept. And it was, and he finally had to take his 2 3-story tall buildings and cut them off at the 2nd story. And they went up separately, and then he put them back together and tried to patch it. And the rest of us all went, you see that line? That's where they were cut off.
Well, and another problem with the elevator, that when shows were leaving, they were always in a hurry, you know, taking the sets apart, and you would have to worry that they would stack a lot of things right up to the door while one load was going down. Did anybody ever get hit in the head with pieces that rolled over the edge?
No.
It's a miracle, because that was always, I mean, I was afraid to look up when I was down there, knowing there was another load right there at the door ready to go if anything were to fall.
Oh, the elevator is an interesting story, and I have to mention the name Lyman Brenneman, who's no longer with us. But Lyman was Lyman was a theater legend in lighting. He was McCandless's assistant in New York City, and then he came here, and I truly believe that Lyman was the one who actually went to bat and fought for the design of this building and kept it so good. When the original estimates came in response to the $1 million bequest for the building, it came in, all the bids came in at $1.5 million, all the way up to $2 million. And Lyman, thank goodness, was put in charge of figuring out what to do. And Lyman very rapidly said, we don't need an elevator that drops 2 stories into the basement to move props and scenery up. He said, saving that money on excavation will mean that we can stay under the $1 million donation. And so he put in that, to me it looks like a New York City sidewalk produce elevator. And it works. Lyman was quite a character. They put him in charge of Parrish Auditorium on the Hamilton campus and then kicked him off the project, and he was bitter about that. And he would tell me, do you see what they did in Parrish? And I said, yeah, they cut off the entire top of the stage house so that you can't fly anything that's taller than 7 feet. And he said, I saved your stage house here so we can fly things up to 17, almost 22 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were a couple things designed into this building, and I've never seen the original design, but there were a couple things I was told about that were designed into the building that disappeared because of the cost. One of those was that the pit was originally designed to be able to be raised and lowered, and it went all the way down to the scene shop.
All the way down to the scene shop.
Now, if that pit goes all the way to the scene shop, moving all of your stuff upstairs is resolved. The other thing that I was told, and I'm not real sure about this, but I was told that the back of the stage was originally designed to have a drop chute down into the scene, into the scene shop, so you could do your scene work there and basically just pull it up and it would come up right at the back of the stage through a slot in the floor. And that also got cut when there wasn't enough money to do everything they wanted to do.
Of the rigging, when the rigging designed for that was, and it was only 18 inches wide in the drawings.
Yeah.
But that was fine. And it went the entire length of the back of the stage. So, especially when you brought shows in, that was ideal. And when that was cut, that was...
Well, Miami built that theater several times. The CPA in Oxford had the paint rack that went all the way down. Plus it had the apron elevator that goes all the way to the basement. It still does.
Yes.
And
that was the base way, that's how you loaded your platforms and so much of your staging props with that elevator. And it was, and not only that, but if they did have orchestras there, they loved it because depending on the kind of concert it was going to be in music, they would take advantage of the elevator to affect the sound, to get better sound out of it. And why that was cut. I mean, I couldn't believe.
Well, Hall Auditorium has the same features.
Yeah.
But it was, John's right. It was the money and the adaptations that Lyman made to this building have stood us in good stead for, 50 years now?
Almost 50 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, clearly, this isn't a perfect theater. It's like any theater. It was built with monetary limitations and such. But I'm going to tell you right now, I've performed across the street. I've performed at other places. If you pick a place to perform, this is the place to come. I mean, this is just a great place.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, I don't know where to begin, actually. I worked here for 4 years when I was a student at MUM. but actually the first time I was in here was probably for a dance recital. I think the first lines I ever spoke on a stage were on this stage in a Christmas recital. That was like one of the moments that I knew I was going to be obsessed with theater and want to be constantly doing theater, around theater, and theater. But then I was in Mike's acting class, not the acting class, the intro to theater class, and it was right after the renovations had finished. So we had been closed for 9 months, and he said, "Do you want a summer job?" I don't know why you said summer, because it was year-round.
Yeah, well, that's the way to get them started, yeah.
Get him hooked.
Yeah,
It's a small gig.
yeah, don't worry.
They're getting calls every day. Hey,
Have you seen my daughter?
Sometime around the fall, I was like, so this is a year-round gig, right?
Yeah.
But I came in, I had no idea where the stage was. I got lost a bunch of times. We spent so much time cleaning up contractors' dust. I mean, it was everywhere. Do you remember your office? The way that it looked, the train wreck that it was. The couch was upturned, the books were all caved in on each other, just dust all over the computer.
Just like usual.
Now, is the bed still up? Sound
No,
booth?
no. Well,
There was a bed up there now. I mean, when you worked late at night, you had to get a little nap in. Even during a performance on occasion.
He has another couch now in the office
Oh.
downstairs.
there's a folding sofa
There's
upstairs.
a futon, yeah.
Yeah,
but he usually is in the office. So. I've
Yeah, I
worked-
wind up sleeping over at least once a year, maybe twice, for something that ends at 11 p.m. on a Friday night and opens on Saturday morning at 8. And it's just like,
I remember those nights of leaving, going, we'll see you in
driving
6
all the way home.
hours, or
I'll be
5
here.
hours. Try to get some rest, but,
I remember
oh
those.
gosh.
yeah, Ruthie was saying center of culture.
Right.
One of the things that I started when I came 27 years ago, I was fairly sure that they were never going to repaint this building. So I began a tradition of having performing artists sign the walls. And we have Woody Harrelson, Beverly Sills, Robin and Linda Williams, everybody that's been here has literally signed the walls, so they
Backstage.
can't paint. Yeah, it's all backstage.
All backstage walls.
There's been an amazing amount of culture that came through the city that the city would not have seen without Finkelman, because there was no place else to do what needed to be done there. And I mean, I mentioned before that we had the Royal Shakespearean Repertory Company out of Washington, D.C. They used to come here regularly every 2 or 3 years. We have major dance companies out of New York City that came here. We had a Hungarian folk dancing group that came from, of all places, Hungary.
Yeah.
And performed here. And these are the kind of cultural things that there's not another venue that plays to them as well as Finkelman does. The venue across the street at the high school is a good venue. It's a nice venue. But it doesn't have the acoustics that this venue has, and it doesn't have the visual
Focus, yeah.
and cleanliness that this has. I mean, there truly, it's cliche, but there's truly not a bad seat in the house.
Yeah.
And we've been able to, this place has attracted some artists. You talked about Beverly Sills. We talked earlier about rock groups. You want to talk about some names? Brownville Station played here. Right. Aerosmith played here. Santana played here.
Ted Nugent was the opening act for Brownsville Station.
There you go. So we've some pretty amazing stuff.
Hugh Laurie,
Yep.
the year after House, Arlo Guthrie, twice, 2 years in a row. The Guess Who drummer, was the only person that I've ever known got injured in the elevator.
Really?
They were loading out the tour, their tour manager was standing to go down with the last load in front of the elevator. As the elevator is dropping, the drummer decides he's going to reach out through the bars and tie the tour manager's shoelaces together. So he reaches out through the bars while the elevator is moving, and he doesn't make it. And fortunately, I was running the elevator and was talking to someone else, and as soon as he yelled, I let go of the dead man switch, and it stopped, and we brought it back up. But he went to the hospital that night. And it turned out all he did was strain a muscle and he was lucky. And so the doctor in the emergency room told him, you can't play the drums for the next 2 weeks. And the guy went, well, that's okay, because we're doing everything to tracks anyway, so all I have to do is look like I'm playing the drums. He said the real problem is going to be my golf game is going to suffer.
I said, didn't Mercedes McCambridge
Yes.
perform here in the
Right.
Glass Menagerie
Yeah, she performed the Glass Menagerie here.
production?
I think as far as the Artisan Lecture Series is concerned, we do need to mention the name Claire Easton.
Yes.
Claire was a genius.
Yeah.
She would go to these showcases in New York and probably Chicago, and she would see groups perform, and she had a real knack for
signing.
getting talent that was just about to become famous. And so they would come here, and then the next thing we knew, they were all over the New York Times, and they were famous.
Yeah.
Canadian Brass was
Yeah.
here before they were really famous. There's a famous classical clarinetist, Richard Stoltzman. He was here. He was just starting his career. Now, he's one of the really famous classical clarinetists. She also was really good at getting her colleagues, her counterparts at other universities to go together. So her counterpart at Wright State and she would get together and they'd say, well, we'll have them perform on Friday night and you can have them on Saturday night, and that saved on airfare and hotels. And she was really brilliant at putting that together.
I'm glad you brought Claire's name up, because I think, beyond a doubt, beyond the design and the Finkelman donation, Claire Easton set this on a path of success, because the way she was impassioned with it. And I saw her from when she started with this, and she'd be around. She'd work all day in the office, but she'd still, if it was any touring company, anything, she'd come over here. There were times she'd come in with snacks. She'd bring extra
and then she'd have a
things.
party at her home
Yes.
afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the
For the
amazing
performers
thing,
and audience members.
she not only had she also had the knack of getting really big names here.
Yeah.
I mean, there were names that came here for the Artisan Lecture Series or things like that you just wouldn't expect to see performing in a town of 50,000 people.
Right.
Two that jumped to my mind is the very first year I was here, there's a famous flamenco dancer. I want to say his name was Jose Ferrar. He was what's his name?
I don't know. I'll think of it.
There's a world-famous Spanish flamenco dancer in the late 1960s, early 70s.
You're right.
His first name is Jose, but I can't remember his last. And he
Used to be on
performed
Ed
here.
Sullivan all the time.
We
Yes.
performed him, and we watched him perform. And I had seen him on Ed Sullivan.
Yeah.
I was pretty amazed that where I was working, this guy was performing. Another amazing catch that we got here was Justice William O. Douglas.
Yeah.
Spoke here
That was
in
the
the Artist.
Casper lecture.
Right.
Yeah, those were the Casper lectures.
Serious.
And amazing stuff. I mean, those are people you don't see stopping in a town of 50,000 people to do something.
Right.
And they were here.
Currently, the person who does booking is Dr. Howard Epstein, and Howard's brilliant at picking people who are on the edge of winning Grammys and who are making jumps from one city to the next and have a dark night and can move in here. I've seen so many acts that Howard has brought. The other person that I need to mention, because he doesn't fit really into what we've actually been talking about, but for a long time, Rod Nimps was the caretaker for this building. During times when budgets were lean and funds were hard to find, the 39 Steinway grand piano that we have is a gem. I have never had a piano player here who hasn't said, gee, this is great. This is a great keyboard. Wow, would you guys be interested in, I've had several people that said, can I buy it? And we kind of go, no. And the grand piano was Rod's project, but Rod was absolutely excellent at finding funds to keep us going here when under other administrators, the doors would have been locked and the thing would have gathered dust because of no operating budget.
I remember, Rod, the one year that I rented this facility for our high school to come do a show here. One of the girls could not get an accompanist for her particular song. And he says, well, what does she want to sing? And I told him, I can play it. So he just came out, and every night he was here and accompanied her so that she could sing her song. And she's gone on to do a lot of work with Cincinnati Ballet and other companies because we kind of nudged her along with her artistic career.
Well, the ballet companies, both Cincinnati and Dayton, they look forward to coming here. And you know, when they have their own stage that they perform on, their full seasons and stuff, but they never objected to coming. They didn't ever complain. They were excited to perform here.
Well, I think one of the things that starting with Gene Bennett and Dave Ballard from day one, when this place was open, one of the things that there was a standard of excellence that was set early on about what would happen here. And I think that has carried through with a number of people. And I think the people who have run this place technically have carried that through. I mean, I worked with this guy for a long time, and I watched it, and I was part of it, and I saw at least 10 companies coming in here, and when they were ready to leave, they asked Ron if he would like a job wherever they went because they liked him. I haven't worked nearly as much with Mike, but I have worked with Mike. And
I nearly blew you up on stage.
You know, these things happen.
Yeah.
And that standard of excellence has carried through the years with not only the organization itself, but the people that they have hired to be the caretakers of this building. And there may only be one small period where that standard of excellence wasn't held up, but that's a very short period out of the whole 50-year history.
Yeah.
And that's important because taking care of this and taking care of what you have is terribly important. You can build $1 million theater, and in 10 years, you can have a theater that isn't worth 50 cents if you don't have people who take good care of it. You don't have people who pay attention to the detail and make sure that things are done right and make sure that the people that come in here and use it treat it right and don't abuse it. And, you know, that's terribly important.
Good. Rod and his piano playing.
Yes.
We used to have regional graduations here, and Rod was a church organist and piano player. So at the beginning of each evening's thing, before we worked our way into pomp and circumstance, Rod would sit there at the 39 grand and just play.
No music.
Just playing. And were you there the night I went around to the crew and said, you got $1? You got $1. And we got together $8, and I went out behind the curtain to Rod, who's playing nonstop, and I said, Rod, the crew got together $8. If you can work in the Gilligan's Island theme.
Heard that
And he did. Absolutely. And while he was there, he said through the curtain to me, just leave the money on the stage manager's account. Didn't miss a note.
Oh, Rod's great.
You know, the last time I was in this theater, waiting for the symphony in the lobby, sitting here in the lobby, Helen Gerber Ramsdale was on one side of me, and we all know what she's done for Miami and Middletown's music scene. And Claire Easton was on the other.
Wow.
And it just, you know, those two women
Two great ladies.
brought us all so much joy and music and so much life to this theater. I just happened to think about that because I was sitting right over there, and it's like, oh, yes.
Theaters are temples.
Yeah.
They have a life, they have a spirit of their own. And you can feel it when you walk into that large open space. It's not necessarily religious spirit, but it is a spirit that just makes you, wow, all the people that have crossed this stage.
And maybe more importantly, all the people who sat in that audience
That's just what I was thinking.
and laughed, cried,
Held their breath.
held their breath, whatever emotion you wanted. And all the different art forms do that. It's not just theater.
Yeah.
You know, if music, dance, it all can do that to you. And the joy, at least from my perspective, of being on that side of the curtain is what's happening on the other side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I once spoke to a group of high school kids. I was in an award ceremony across the street. And one thing I said to them, I said, you need to keep in mind you have been blessed with a gift that not all people are blessed with. The ability to entertain people, the ability to make people laugh, the ability to make people cry is a gift that someone, whether you believe in a God or whether you believe in something, you got that gift somewhere. And it is awfully, awfully selfish of you to not feel willing to share it with people. Don't stop sharing the gift with people. And that's what I told them. And, you know, that's just such a big piece of it is the excitement of what goes on the other side. Walking out here after a show and people walking up to you and you have truly done something special for them. They are truly feeling something special. Whether you were in the show, whether you were backstage, it's making difference. It's a sense of wow, I had this impact, and these people are happier and more fulfilled than they were as a result of what we did. That is so cool. That is so cool. There's nothing about performing that's more fun than that.
What a way to end it. Do we have your permission to end this recording now?
Sure.
Yes.